Hello everyone, thank you for staying in our presentation. Lorien has introduced the origins and the theoretical assumptions of critical ethnographic approach. In this part, I will focus on explaining why and how critical ethnographers use this analytic approach in their studies. Why critical ethnography? Critical ethnographic approach are particularly useful when researchers are concerned about issues of power in society. As Nobelt, Flores, Murillo stated, they see critical ethnography as a new path to reinscribing critique in ethnography. Similar with traditional ethnographic studies, in-depth interviews and observation, either participant or non-participant observations, are two most commonly used data collection techniques in critical ethnographic research. The in-depth interviews include semi-structured interviews, unstructured interviews, and dialogic interviewing. In addition, critical ethnographic research emphasizes on seeking the life histories and beliefs of local community through working with the core consultants of the culture group. The other techniques includes work with the key consultants of the community, and the researchers must pay attention to hundreds of details. Problem-oriented research and discovery of local beliefs, life history, and it should be longitudinal research and should be team research. Here are the roles that critical ethnographists are expected to play in their studies. First, to keep alert to the structural factors while probing meanings. Second, to explore, where possible, the structural factors that underlay the contradictions between action and words. Number 3, to see what extent group processes are externally mediated. Number 4, to investigate how the subjects see group norms and practices constrained by external social factors. Number 5, to see how prevailing ideologies are addressed. Number 6, to analyze the extent to which subversive or resistant practices transcend prevailing ideological forms, and so on. In this slide, I'd like to talk about the advantage and drawbacks of researchers being closely involved in their research and participants. Specifically, when researchers staying close to their research, the advantage is the researcher has a feel for the diverse data and can see how it relates to alternative theoretical frameworks. But the drawback is the researchers may easily fall in the failure of to see the wood for the trees. This is why it is necessary to adopt the multiple reading approach to the material. There are three main goals for critical ethnographers while they apply for this approach. Goal number 1, to identify the inequities and power imbalances in the society. Goal number 2, to move toward political action that can redress the injustices found or constructed during the research process. Goal number 3, to consider from what is to what could be, to contribute to emancipatory knowledge in the discourses of social justice. In this slide, I listed the 4 key principles that researchers should remember while doing critical ethnographic research. Here is a Carl-Becken's model of doing critical ethnography. In 1996, Phil Carl-Becken further developed a detailed five-stage process underpinned by ideas of William James, John Dewey, George Mead, Anthony Giddens, and others, but in particular Jürgen Habermas's notion of communicative action. This approach has subsequently become the mainstay for critical qualitative research in general and for critical ethnography in particular. The Carl-Becken's five stages of critical ethnography research include: Stage number 1. Build a critically reflective primary record of thick description using a hermeneutic interpretive approach to make sense of what is going on in the setting. Stage number 2. Preliminary reconstructive analysis or researcher interpretation is then undertaken regarding what has been gathered. Stage number 3. Preliminary data analysis and thematic analysis can be used here to identify power location, role relations, meanings and cultural values, as well as validity. Stage number 4. Dialogical data should be then gathered through interviews and focus groups. The data is examined to discover system relations between specific sites, and these findings are linked to the wider social, political, and economic context. Stage number 5. Findings are then considered in relation to general theories of society, both to help explain what has been discovered in stages 1 to 4, and to challenge and refine macrosociological theories themselves. After the data analysis procedure, the researchers need to report their critical ethnographic research. And the most important rule for writing a critical ethnographic report is to avoid the conventional research report format. The report of a critical ethnographic research should be presented as coherent argument, a story with a plot. The research should be presented as a story. Below are two examples of the applications of data analysis of using critical ethnographic approach. The first example shows a traditional critical ethnographic data analysis procedure, and the second one is a creative poetic representations. The first study was conducted by Dunbar in 2009. Finding Their Way, a critical ethnography of 5 African American women educators' early experience to develop into culturally relevant pedagogies. Here is a step-by-step analysis guideline that Dunbar used in her research. Here is a brief example of how Dunbar reported her critical ethnographic studies. As I mentioned earlier, the critical ethnographic report should avoid the conventional formats, so Dunbar here used a story way to tell her research results. The second example is from Dr. Harnor. from utilizing the methodology of poetic ethnography, the article presents a U.S. soldier's narrative of his experience during the Second Iraq War in 2003. The poem presented in the following slide results from a process of participant interview, transcription, and poetic rendition.